But yeah, today I'm going to talk about iced tea because it is hot. And in fact, I have my air conditioner running in the other room and you can probably hear it, and I hope it's not too distracting. So we're going to make some iced tea and drink some iced tea. And so you may be thinking, maybe wondering, well, why do I have these little gong fu cups? That's because we're actually going to do a little bit of talking about how to deal with bias in tasting tea as well today. So, oh, hey, Chara, welcome. We've got some people live. So yeah, I'm going to be drinking some iced teas brewed in two different ways, and I'm going to be doing a way of tasting those that tries to minimize bias. So I see a lot of people on Instagram that are doing tastings to try to see how much things like, you know, the type of teapot you brew in affects the flavor of tea, or things like, oh, whether you boil your water in a cast iron pot or a glass kettle, you know, makes a difference. I see a lot of that kind of stuff on Facebook and Instagram. And that's great that people are like trying to test these things out, but it's pretty apparent to me that a lot of people don't know about confirmation bias. So confirmation bias is really important, and especially when we're talking about stuff that's so subtle, like the difference that the type of water makes, or the difference in whether it's Yixing clay or a porcelain teapot. Confirmation bias is really, really important to understand if you're actually trying to make claims that those make a difference. So what is confirmation bias? It's when you sort of know, maybe subconsciously, that two things are going to taste different, and they taste different. And a great example of this is a study with wine tasters. People who are professional wine tasters were given white wine with red food coloring added, and they started describing it as having, you know, oh, stone fruit and dark cherry flavors and all sorts of flavors that are characteristic of red wines just because it looked red. They saw the color of the wine, and that primed their brains to think that it's going to taste a certain way. And so the same thing is going to happen if you're trying to make some comparison about whether, you know, tea tastes better brewed in your expensive Yixing teapot versus a porcelain gaiwan. If you see that it's coming out of that Yixing teapot, that's going to prime your brain to think that it's going to taste better or different. No matter how hard you try consciously to be unbiased, it doesn't matter. Right? These were professional wine tasters in this study, and that red food coloring threw them off. So one way that you can do a less biased tasting is by doing it blind, right? So having somebody bring you two things and not telling you what they are, having them being in identical cups, like two identical cups like this, and not telling you which one's which, and also trying your best not to look at the thing because, like we just said, the color is going to tip you off potentially that things are different. And you could taste two things and you could, you know, decide which one's better than the other. The problem with that, though, is that with just two cups, there's a 50% chance that you're going to pick one of those over the other just by random chance. So if your tea from your Yixing teapot and your cheap porcelain gaiwan taste exactly the same, and you're forced to choose between two cups, and you go, yeah, I think this one tastes a little bit better, and it turns out to be it's the Yixing pot, well, that's not really proof because it's just a coin flip that you picked that one, right? And even if you repeat that same tasting with just two cups a whole bunch of times, it's still kind of hard to say for certain if one tastes better than the other unless you're like always picking the Yixing pot 100% of the time, right? So if you do 10 trials and in, you know, 60% of them you picked the Yixing brewed tea over the porcelain gaiwan brewed tea, that's still not a great amount of evidence. It's the same as getting, you know, flipping a coin and getting 6 heads out of 10. It's pretty often that happens, right? It's not like super rare that you would get that. So what I'm going to do today is something called a triangle tasting. And this is a way to get around that problem, some of the problems you have with just sort of having to choose between two. So in a triangle tasting, you have 3 cups. 2 of them are going to be the same, and 1 of them is going to be different. And I don't know, I'm not going to know which one is which. I'm not going to know which tea there are two of. I'm not going to know which there's only one of. And I'm not going to know which cup has which. And I've also labeled the cups with random 3-digit numbers. And this is a common practice in triangle tasting. This is better than labeling them 1, 2, 3, because that could introduce a different type of bias, not necessarily a bias, this confirmation bias, but rather just a bias in maybe the person that's pouring the tea. They're going to pick, cup number 1 to get the better tea or something like that. So what I've done, and I'm going to ask my my assistant, Lindsay, can you bring me some tea now? Yeah. Let's do the green tea first, because I think that's going to be more subtle.
Okay.
So thank you. So what I did is I made some cold brewed green tea and some just flash chilled iced green tea. And I want to see if there's a difference in the flavor. And then after that, we'll talk a little bit maybe about why cold brew and iced tea are going to actually probably taste different. I'm guessing they'll taste subtly different, but I don't know. We'll find out. So what I did is I brewed kukicha, which is a Japanese green tea made with the stems and leaves. That's one of my favorite iced teas. So I brewed it 2 different ways. I did it cold brew, started it on Friday evening, and now it's Sunday afternoon, with 5 grams of tea and about 2 cups of water. And I weighed this all out so that I would know to make the flash chilled tea with exactly the same ratios. And I just let it sit in water in the fridge since Friday evening. The flash chilled tea, I just put how I did that on my Instagram story, but basically I'm brewing a concentrate with half the amount of water, hot. For the green tea, the kukicha, I did it for 1 minute, which is typical for kukicha. I used boiling water. And then poured that over ice in a cocktail shaker and just shook it to melt that ice and then get it really cold. And it ends up with the same volume of total volume as I did with the cold brewed tea. So I'm guessing that they're going to taste subtly different. And because I am guessing that, if I were only given, 2 cups and I knew ahead of time, one was the iced and one was the cold brewed, I'm going to be more likely to taste that difference because of confirmation bias. But if I have a triangle tasting and one of those cups is different, 2 are the same, if there's only a subtle, imperceptible difference in those teas, then I'm less likely to be able to say, oh yeah, they're totally different. In fact, I'm not able to say that because there's 3 instead of 2. So we'll see how this goes. I'm guessing that I will be able to pick the one that is different out of the 3, but maybe not. Maybe cold brew and iced tea are similar enough. So I've got this green tea, which is on its way right now. And then I also did this with a black tea because I feel like with a black tea, there's maybe going to be a more stark contrast between the cold brewed and the iced. So yeah, go ahead. Put them down. You need to remember.
Oh no.
That's the important thing about about blind studies, is that at least somebody needs to know which is which. Do you want to write it down?
Yeah, I didn't write it down.
Here's a...
I'm worried.
That's okay. So I'm going to taste these in kind of a random order here, I guess. Not really random. I'm going to go one direction. Okay. Pretty light. Pretty light. I'm going to taste this one. Okay, that tastes different to me than the first one. And then... Okay. Yep. I think, this is interesting because I think this one tastes different. I think it tastes like ice cubes. It tastes like my freezer. So I'm going to guess that cup 852 is the different one, and that 265 and 609, these ones are the same. But you guys know, is that right?
Yeah.
That's right. So I got it right. But you guys noticed that when I tasted these first two, I actually thought these first two tasted different. So this is really important to have a triangle tasting. So again, for you, those of you who are just joining, this is called, what I'm doing is called a triangle tasting. And in it, I don't know which, two of these are the same and one of them is different. And I'm trying to figure out if I can taste the difference between cold brewed and iced tea. And actually the biggest difference is freezer smell. So everybody probably experiences this, but when you have something in the freezer for a long time, it starts to smell like a freezer. There's that characteristic freezer odor. It's something to do with the plastics, I think, that are in the freezer. But we have these silicone ice cube trays, which are awesome for like popping ice out really easy, but silicone like soaks up odors, so we have to like boil them every couple months, or else they just make our ice cubes smell like that kind of gross plasticky freezer smell. So this definitely has this. I didn't account for that, right? If I want to do a better job with this, I would have used cleaner ice, and then I think I might not have been able to taste the difference actually. Did you taste them? Taste.
I think this one's also slightly darker, I think.
Yeah, the color's a little bit different. I was trying not to look at it again because I don't want confirmation bias creeping in here. If I see the color of them and they're slightly different, I would be primed in my brain to taste one of them as different than the others. That's confirmation bias. So I'm trying not to look at the color. I think that maybe the cold brewed one is a little bit smoother and a little bit more umami kind of. I'm not really subtle though. So
you ready for a black tea?
I think I'm ready for a black tea.
Okay.
Let's do a black tea. So I also did this with a black tea. Oh, can you bring out the bag of the, or I'll grab, yeah, can you grab the bag for the black tea?
It's on the table?
Yeah, it's on the kitchen table.
Okay.
So that was with a pretty mild green tea, so I kind of feel like I'm actually surprised. Like I thought there would be a bigger difference than there was, but I guess it makes sense because it's a pretty subtle tea. Thanks. So the black tea I used is this Sun Moon Lake tea from Whispering Pines. It's really kind of interesting because it has this incredibly strong wintergreen aroma to it, which my wife really doesn't like. I think it's kind of cool and weird. It's made from the Ruby 21 cultivar, which I guess that's pretty common, that it has this kind of wintergreeny flavor. And like it smells like wintergreen. Yeah, it smells like wintergreen, like chewing gum wintergreen with maltiness in it. So I kind of thought this might be a really good iced tea. So this one I've also brewed both as a cold brewed tea that I started on Friday evening, and then a flash chilled iced tea where I brewed it, double strength, and then poured it over ice and shook it in a cocktail shaker. So we're gonna do a triangle tasting with this and see if I can tell the difference. And then we're gonna talk a little bit about why cold brew and iced tea might actually taste different, a little bit about the chemistry of why that might be the case. I like both methods. I mean, cold brew is super easy. You just tea, water, put it in the fridge, but you do have to think ahead a little bit. Whereas a flash chilled iced tea is really nice if you can just make it anytime, just like you would make a pot of tea. You're just a little extra step, just pouring it over ice or shaking it with ice. So they're both good. They both serve their purpose. They're going to be subtly different tasting. We'll talk a little bit about why. So, if you're doing some of these sort of tasting experiments, maybe on Instagram, or you're talking about stuff on Facebook, and you're trying to say that Yixing tastes better than porcelain, or water from a cast iron kettle tastes better than water from a glass kettle. Tea is a subtle thing already, and I think that's why a lot of us really get into teas, because we're really into tasting these subtle things. But when you're talking about flavor differences that are so subtle like that, you're really susceptible to confirmation bias. and the order you taste things in also matters, because flavors can build, especially bitterness can kind of build on your palate. So you might taste one tea and then taste another tea and go, oh, that one's a lot more bitter. But that might just be because of this building bitterness. And so it's really actually hard.
You might not want to look at
Yeah,
these
I want to
very
not look
closely.
at these very closely. I think I can already. I didn't look at the third one, so I'm going to not look at all. Okay. That's pretty good. Pretty wintergreeny. This is the middle one.
Yeah.
Okay. So that, I'm not looking at these. That tastes maybe a little more strong to me, a little more astringent, but I'm not sure yet. I gotta taste the third one. Okay, I gotta go back because, like I said, that building bitterness, they tasted just increasingly bitter to me. Okay. Okay. I'm kind of leaning towards this middle one being different. This is hard.
Really?
I think it's actually harder than the iced tea because it's stronger. Yeah, than the green tea. Sorry, it's stronger, so it actually masks the ice cube flavor, which was the dead giveaway on the first one. I'm gonna go with this one being different.
You're right.
I got it, guys. That was actually hard. They're actually pretty similar. So again, if I had looked at these, like I did see these first two, and I knew that these two were different because this one was darker. I could also see, like I made this one more recently, and I could still see some froth on the surface from shaking. When you shake the tea, it gets all frothy. So there was still a little bit of bubbles on the surface. So I could immediately tell that this middle one was the shaken tea. So this is not the best test. Because I already had a little bit of confirmation bias, right? I knew that this one was the shaken flash chilled one, and that this one was the cold brewed one. My challenge was I had not looked at this one, and my challenge was figuring out which one this went with, basically. So that already sort of narrowed it down. So they're pretty good, though. I like it as an iced tea. I would make this again as an iced tea. I might even like it more iced than hot.
I think the cold brews are better, but I think you're right. It's the ice cube flavor.
Yeah, ice cube flavor is a thing to deal with. So to recap, triangle tastings are a cool tool. The way you do them is you have 3 cups. 2 of the things are the same. 1 is different. You don't know which is which, so you have to have somebody else do this for you, set it up for you. They're labeled with random 3-digit numbers, which I just got from Google, and that's to prevent bias in the person pouring them and from you choosing, right? You might be more likely to associate cup number 1 with, the best tea subconsciously, and you might be more inclined. And those little tiny subtle biases really matter when you're trying to taste really subtle differences, like between the same tea brewed with the same amount of water 2 different ways. And then in reality, if you really wanted to have this be a formal test, you'd need to repeat this multiple times. Because even though there's 3 cups and it's not just a 50-50 chance of getting, choosing the right one, it's still a 1 in 3 chance of choosing the right one. So it's actually would be pretty easy for me to guess which one's different and have it be just by chance, right? So I would need to repeat this multiple times, and I would expect that if I could actually tell the difference, I would get it right more than a third of the time, right? Which is random chance. So even getting it right 50% of the time is like not that good, because that's not that much better than a third of the time. And if you really wanted to get serious, there's actual statistical tests you could do to figure out if you can actually tell the difference. You'd also want to randomize, if you were doing this in multiple trials, you'd want to randomize which one was 2 cups and which one was 1, right? So this was 2 cups of the cold brew. Is that right? Yeah, two cups of the cold brew and 1 was of the flash chilled. So if I were doing this multiple trials, I'd want to randomize and not have it be like, not have any pattern, because otherwise, again, you can introduce this confirmation bias where you're starting to figure out, oh, well, this time it was 2 of the cold brew. Next time it's going to be only 1 of the cold brew and 2 of the flash chilled. You'd want to actually, flip a coin or something to decide which tea got 2 and which tea got 1. And when I say you, I really mean somebody else, right? The whole point of this is to not know yourself. So this is actually something that's pretty easy to do as long as you have somebody else to help you randomize and help you pour the tea. And so I'd encourage, people out there that are doing Instagram, YouTube videos, Facebook posts that are trying to make these claims about very, very subtle things in tea, to try doing one of these triangle tests and see if can you really actually taste the difference in the water or the kettle that you used. Can you actually pick that out if you have a triangle tasting like this? So let's talk about why cold brew and flash chilled might taste different. And just very briefly. So when you brew tea, there's a whole bunch of different chemicals in those tea leaves that get dissolved into the water, right? And that's what makes tea. And you also probably know that different things dissolve at different rates, right? So, sugar and salt dissolve differently in water. And in the same way, all the stuff that's in tea dissolves differently in water. And it's not the same at every temperature. So there are some chemicals that are going to dissolve well when it's cold, and just a little bit better when it's hot temperatures. So, for example, small molecules that are pretty polar, ones that are pretty water soluble, things like caffeine and L-theanine, the amino acid in tea, that gives it a sort of umami flavor. Those are both really soluble in water, and they're going to come out in cold water pretty well. Whereas bigger molecules like polyphenols and tannins are probably not going to come out in solution as easily when it's cold, compared to the caffeine and theanine. Whereas if it's hot, they're gonna come out more easily into the solution. That's just a guess. I haven't actually looked into see if there's any literature on specifically about cold brewed tea versus hot brewed tea. But that's why we might get some different flavors here. Also, in a hotter liquid, you're going to extract more stuff, but you're also going to lose some of the volatiles, the aroma compounds, more easily. And so it might actually be in the cold brew that you're retaining more of the flavor. So, yep, cold brew and iced tea are going to taste different, just like we know with coffee. Cold brew coffee and iced coffee definitely taste different. And so, yeah, that's kind of all I was trying to say before my video got all choppy. Sorry about that if you were watching earlier. So do triangle tastings, drink iced tea or cold brewed tea. They're both great. Make sure your ice cubes don't have that awful freezer taste and ruin your iced tea. So that's it for Tea Science Sunday. And I will put this on IG Live, and that's where I'm going to be posting these things from now on. So please leave me questions, comments. If you have any ideas for future tea science topics, I am interested in hearing them, because I'm sort of out of ideas right now. I'll think of something eventually. But that's it for now. See you later.